Guys, it's the Political Kid, and today I'm going to be explaining the middle America political things that were happening, and this is just a sequel on the other video I did on early American political history, so I hope you enjoy and have fun. So basically, we're going to be talking about the political stances during the Civil War. Obviously, the Republicans were very popular, considering that it was the Democrats who seceded, and it felt like for the whole war that the Republicans would gain another term. However, the Republicans did have a lot of division, and also the Northern Democrats. For example, the Northern Democrats, there was the Copperheads, who were basically like, let's just get out of the Civil War, let's have the South do their own thing. And then there was the War Democrats who supported the war, however they do not support a lot of the Lincoln proposals like freeing all the slaves. They just want to be way more moderate. On the other side, with the Republicans, Lincoln was definitely more of a moderate Republican, and so a lot of radicals who wanted, like, African Americans to have same rights as every citizen, and like voting rights now, and every single slave to be free. They ran a third party with, if you remember, John C. Fremont, the guy who ran in 1856 as their front runner. However, he dropped out in the 1864 election since he thought that it would just cause the Democrats to win. And Lincoln, who was a moderate Republican, had the National Union Party with him, and the Republicans basically endorsed him. And then, since a lot of soldiers actually supported the war effort in the Republicans, they voted for Lincoln, which was really, really cool, considering that they were literally dying at war, but they still supported it. And that's why Lincoln won in a landslide against the Democrats. Following the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the radical Republicans had a big majority in Congress, like, after the war, and they had a Democratic president. Andrew Johnson was Democratic, so they had a hard time struggling with bills and things to do with the South and Reconstruction, and it all came to, like, a weird point where they impeached Johnson for not passing, like, certain bills, and Johnson was acquitted by only one vote, so that was really interesting. In 1868, they nominated Grant, who was the famous general for the Union during the Civil War, and he won very easily, considering that his opponent was a Democrat, and a lot of people didn't support Democrat. Like, a lot of people still didn't support Democrats since the war just ended, and also there was a lot of protections for African Americans in the South, and they heavily voted for Grant. Now, in 1872, a lot of people knew there was a lot of corruption, and people didn't support Grant as they did in 1868. However, their opponent was actually a liberal Republican, Horace Greeley, who had a newspaper and was endorsed by the Democrats, since the Democrats were like, hey, we don't want the Republicans to win, so we'll just do whatever's best for Grant losing. So they endorsed him. However, the Grant won in a landslide again, and unfortunately, Greeley died before they could certify the electoral vote, so the electoral vote was very interesting. Some people even voted for Horace Greeley even though he was dead, which was very interesting. But this is the end of the Reconstruction era, as in 1876, we have Rutherford B. Hayes winning by one electoral vote in an election where he didn't win the popular vote, and there was so many contested states where the election was given to him by a committee which voted barely for him by one vote, because one person left the committee and a Republican joined it. So that's how they won the election. For Hayes winning the presidency, the Democrats were like, hey, can you get out of the South and let us do our own thing, and then you could be president. So they accepted that, and it was terrible for the U.S. considering that Reconstruction couldn't end there since there was still so many problems that would last like a century and beyond. In 1880, Rutherford B. Hayes did not run for re-election considering that he was unpopular and he barely won the 1876 election. So the Republicans nominated James Garfield, who was considered a new politician and like a reformer, with Chester Arthur as his running mate, who was a more corrupt Republican, as more corrupt officials in the Republican Party were like, hey, if you're gonna have a reformer, we need a position where we could still have some power, so they nominated Chester Arthur. And then the Democrats, they nominated a war hero from the Civil War to get more of those, to get more of the Civil War, like, veterans vote. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, as James Garfield barely won the popular vote, but also won the electoral vote by a considerable margin. So that's what happened. Unfortunately, James Garfield was assassinated, and for the next, 3.5 years, it was just Chester Arthur, setting a very lame duck presidency, which he wouldn't run for election in 1884, considering that he was unpopular and also that his health was declining rapidly. So they nominated James Blaine, who was seen as a corrupt politician, and the Democrats nominated Grover Cleveland, who was from New York. And since Grover Cleveland barely carried the state of New York, the Democrats barely won the Electoral College, so that's how they won. 1888, since the economy was in stagnation, and the Republicans nominated Benjamin Harrison, the grandson of William Henry Harrison, and since Harrison was way more popular on the front about tariffs, since tariffs were basically the question of the day back then, he won pretty handily against Cleveland. However, Cleveland would be coming back for revenge in 1892, as the economy was in stagnation still, so he came back. Also, there was a populist party with James Weaver, which won a few electoral votes from the western states. In 1896, William McKinley from the Republicans ran against a reformer Democrat who was considered very young, very new in a new brand of Democrat, William Jennings Bryan. However, he couldn't appeal to a lot of people in the North, which dominated the Electoral College, so he lost, and then also lost when he ran again against William McKinley in 1900. With Teddy Roosevelt as William McKinley's running mate. However, William McKinley sadly died a few months into his second term, so Theodore Roosevelt had to be inaugurated, and the economy was in good shape, so Roosevelt was able to win an election in 1904 in a landslide. In 1908, William Jennings Bryan ran again against Teddy Roosevelt's picked successor, which was William Howard Taft, and William Howard Taft basically ran this campaign of, William Jennings Bryan's running a third time, why should we vote for him? Vote for Taft now, you could vote for Bryan anytime. So Taft won in a pretty considerable margin. In 1912, the Republican Party was very divided, with the more conservatives favoring William Howard Taft, and the more progressive Republicans favoring Teddy Roosevelt to come back. They eventually picked with Taft, however, the delegates were very corrupt, and it was considered a stolen nomination, so the progressives in the Republican Party formed their own political party, the Progressive Party, or also known as the Bull Moose Party, which did really good in the election, beating out the Republicans. In the Democratic Party, however, they nominated Woodrow Wilson, who was a person who ran but didn't think he had a chance, but until William Jennings Bryan endorsed him, so he was able to get on the ballot and win the nomination. Since the Republicans were very divided, Woodrow Wilson won in a landslide, and there was also a considerable third party with the Socialist Party winning about 6% of the popular vote, which was very strange in the old days. In 1914, World War I started, which definitely interfered with the elections in 1916, as it was it was gaining traction as an issue, which Woodrow Wilson and the Democrats basically said, we'll keep you out of war, and the Republicans, who ran with Charles Hughes, were like, we'll keep you out of war, but we'll be prepared for war just in case. But that wasn't really popular, and they weren't able to appeal to a lot of German minorities in California, so the Republicans lost the election barely in California, which meant they lost the election barely. But in 1917, Woodrow Wilson did go to war with Germany because of the Zimmermann telegram, and that dominated U.S. politics, considering that it was a successful war for the U.S. However, Woodrow Wilson was not very popular, and his whole second term was just like foreign policy, which didn't help his domestic policy, and the 1919 Red Scare also was an issue. So in 1920, they nominated a person who was close to Woodrow Wilson, which didn't help them, while the Republicans ran a new person on the political stage who was very popular, and his name was Harding. His name was Warren Harding. He was a fairly new politician, senator from Ohio, and he was able to win in a landslide against the Democratic candidate in 1924. Since Warren Harding died in 1923, Calvin Coolidge, the incumbent president, won in a landslide again. There's also a third-party progressive movement, not the progressive movement from 1912, but a progressive movement from Wisconsin from a guy named Robert La Follette, and he was able to win Wisconsin. In 1928, since the economy was in good shape because of the Roaring Twenties, they nominated Hoover, a very popular and well-known person throughout America, for the Republicans, and they nominated a very unpopular Catholic for the Democrats. So Hoover won in a landslide, but because of the Great Depression, FDR easily beat Herbert Hoover in the 1932 election. 1936, since the Great Depression wasn't really recovering, the Republicans thought they had a good chance, so they went with a more interventionist with the Depression candidate, who was Alf Landon. However, the Republicans didn't realize how popular the Democrats were, so FDR won in one of the biggest landslides in American history, with Alf Landon only winning 2 states, which definitely hurt the Republicans and almost caused the Republicans to collapse. In 1940, they ran with a guy who was considered more of a reformist. However, they didn't do well, so they did better than 1936. However, they couldn't beat him, and by a large margin, FDR won in a landslide again. In 1944, they nominated Thomas Dewey, who was a popular candidate from New York. However, since the World War II was finally in effect, he lost pretty handily to FDR, and sadly, FDR died and Harry Truman took over. And everybody thought since Harry Truman was unpopular, Thomas Dewey was running again, that Harry Truman would lose. However, because of the Cold War and Harry Truman's vigorous campaigning, Harry Truman was able to win the 1948 election. Well, that's going to be it, guys. I'm going to end it here. I'll probably make a modern American political history video. However, that'll be in a bit, so you guys could be looking forward to that. You guys voted for this video, so I hope you like it. You could comment down below what you want me to make next for future videos, and just have a good day. Also, maybe like and subscribe would really help, and maybe notifying other creators of my existence so that I would be noticed more. But thanks, have a good day, see you later.